hellish language. And it said, follow him. He's going to take me on a tour. And he walked up, just walked a couple of feet away from me. He came up and he stuck his hand in the end of the horizon. I thought that was weird. There's the horizon. I can't go any farther. He stuck it, he ripped it open. And all this blast of air, remember that blast of air coming in, and the smell hit me. And I saw a wide, dusty road. I stepped out of it. It's a wide, broad road. And off in the middle was the Bible talks about that and elsewhere. It was so hot, so dry. And I looked around and I turned around and I looked back and I saw I came out of a cube, a big square cell, a cube. I called it a cube. And it's so hot, everything's kind of distorted. So in my book I write that it was 10 by 10. But actually I really wasn't sure how the dimensions of it. Bill Weiss in his book, 23 Minutes of Hell, describes the same cubes, type cubes I saw, as being 14 by 14. So that they could have been that size. I just said 10 by 10. But I stepped out of this cube and I thought, wow, that's interesting, because inside it seemed like I was as big as the all outdoors. And yet it was only 10 by 10 or 14 by 14. It was small inside, but inside was an illusion of space and time. It was like what's inside your mind was being portrayed in there. And I looked up and I saw that the cubes were stacked on top of each other, 6 high to the top of the road. There's 6 cubes on top of each other, and they're set back a little bit, so there's ledges. And on these ledges ran all these demonic creatures. Immediately when they saw me, they were really angry. I looked over, and then we saw that started walking across the wide, dusty road. It was a long way. We got to these big shaft, elevator shaft. I looked around, I could see the cubes. It looked like what it looks like is a pit, a spiral staircase, if you will. The wall is where the cubes are, and you step out to where the railing is. That's where the void is. You look up and down. It's a bottomless pit. Now, what I'm going to share with you is only a small part of hell, because hell is a very big place. Some of our guest speakers have seen other parts of hell that I didn't see. I can verify kind of what they saw because I was able to look down some corridors and see some similar things. But I saw just one small place called the pit. And this spiral road was like that with these cells in the back wall. Years later, I discovered that the Bible declares that in hell are chambers. It says in Proverbs 7:27, folly's house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. Hell is described as a prison, or a dungeon, a prison. Listen to this. Isaiah 24, verse 22. That's Isaiah 24:22. They'll be gathered together as prisoners in a pit. They'll be shut up in prison, and after many days, they will be punished. Wow. That correlates with what's happening in Revelations, chapter 20. Death and hell were thrown into the lake of fire. After many days, the prisoners are gathered together in a pit. Wow. Ezekiel chapter 31, verse 16 and 18, and Ezekiel chapter 32, 21 through 32 describes the pit of hell like this. The pit is circular, verse 22, with their vaults or graves. The Hebrew word that's used to translate grave means a cell, a vault, a chamber, a sepulcher, a tomb. Interesting. And it talks about this place being round about. Ezekiel describes that people are placed individually in chambers which are set in the walls, parts of the pit, facing their leader, who's located in the open central tomb area where you hoist the body down a shaft. That's when I noticed all these tornado vortexes dropping people off and all these cubes. That was weird. I could see the tornadoes and people being dropped off in these cubes. There were thousands, millions of them. Ezekiel describes people there as being cognate, awake, feeling, hearing, speaking, and they're definitely not asleep. Verse 21 says, the mighty chief shall speak of them with their helpers out of the midst of hell. Verse 24 states that people were placed in the nether parts of the earth, the pit, where they'll bear their shame with all the others who have gone down into the pit. On different levels, there were little teeny holes. It was an incredible place. Job chapter 26, verses 5 and 6 describes what happens to the dead. I don't have time to go through a big, huge Hebrew study on this, but if you guys do on your own, this is an incredible passage of Scripture, especially out of the Hebrew text. It says, Job 26, verses 5 and 6, the dead tremble under the waters and their inhabitants. Hell is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. The dead tremble. That means they twist, they whirl, they dance, they writhe, they fear, they travail, they're anguished, they're pained. Under the waters describes the feeling of suffocation or drowning, the pressure of being under a great deep depth of the earth, not under just water, but pressure. How many ever dive down into the water? You know how the pressure feels? It gets harder and harder, the deeper you go. Imagine that and you can't breathe, because that's what it's like. You feel like you're being suffocated in there. So much. And then all of a sudden, we walk back out to the wide, dusty road, walked across it, and I saw all these demons, thousands, millions of them, gathering about these wavy, vaporous beams, and all of a sudden they looked like telephone poles. For some reason, they looked like telephone poles to me. And these demons were climbing up. And then all of a sudden it was granted to me I could see through the walls of hell, and these poles were extending out of the earth in certain places, geographic locations, and on top of these poles sat these big demons, because demons have rank. The taller the ones have the most power, and the little ones do their bidding. And they're up there singing songs, not heavenly music. Their songs are very melodic, very monotone, very dull. And what they would do is entice people to hear this music, and they'd dance to the tune. Someone being, doom and gloom type hum. I'm so miserable. Oh, woe is me. I feel so bad. It's that type of thing. People start believing it, believing a lie that this thing was. As soon as you believe that, this thing would call down to these other demons. They would escape out of there, and they go attack you and try to drag you down there, try to stain God's character, using you in a battle to get God to go back on his word. When I read years later Ephesians chapter 6, verse 13, it speaks of powers and principalities in the heavenly places over the earth. Well, I saw that. I saw it happening. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 12, verses 43 through 45, I don't have time to read the whole thing. It says, when an unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through the waterless places, or the dry places, seeking rest, but finds none. And that person gets better through whatever means. And then all of a sudden that demon up there will say, hey, this guy's getting better. So he finds 7 more worse.